Welcome to the Screen Podcast. Thanks for joining us for insight and analysis of the global film industry. I'm Wendy Mitchell, contributing editor at Screen International and Screen Daily. I'm thrilled, as always, to be joined by Screen's editor-in-chief, Matt Mueller, and deputy editor, Louise Tutt. Hi, Matt, and hi, Louise.
Hey, Wendy.
Morning.
In this episode, we're talking about some of the hot topics from the Screen Summit last week. This was a great event held in London, organized by Screen International. We're going to talk about some more detail about how producers in the UK particularly are struggling, and also some bright points about what funders and distributors are excited to see more of in the British industry. We're also going to look at the latest on Trump's tariff plans for films, plans being a very loose term with Mr. Trump. And finally, we'll bring in Charles Gant, Screen's awards and box office editor, to look at rule changes at the Baftas and the Oscars this year and how that could impact the races. So last week, Screen hosted this very successful Screen Summit, very buzzy day, some amazing speakers, a lot of audience engagement. But there's a few topics we wanted to pull out and reflect on from that summit. One is the plight of UK producers. There were some great points made at the summit about how producers in the UK see the current landscape. I think Ben Roberts, CEO of the BFI, came on to start the day and said it's been really tough times for producers. So, Matt, what were you hearing from some of the producers you heard at the summit?
Well, yeah, as you say, Wendy, it was a very buzzy day. Loads of people in the room and some really great speakers, and including a number of UK producers. You know, some of the most established names in the business, from Ian Canning at Seesaw, Guy at Element, Liza Marshall at Hera, but also people on the making their way in the industry, but possibly sort of struggling a bit more to establish themselves. Because I think that was one key theme that came out of the day was the fact that it's very hard to establish your career as a producer these days in the UK. It's such a challenging landscape. And one of the overriding issues that came up throughout the day was the need to defer fees as a producer in order to close the budget and get your film actually before cameras. You know, by the time you're asked to defer fees, you're so committed financially already. You've probably already sort of been funding pre-production, location management searches. The shoot might have started, as one producer pointed out. She literally didn't close financing until her film had actually wrapped.
This is Sarah Brocklehurst talking about The Outrun, which
Outrun.
on paper looks like a very successful film, but they didn't close the finance until after the shoot wrapped.
Yeah.
Which must be just, I don't know how you sleep at night if that's the case.
Well, she was saying it was sleepless nights. I think that's the point, is the fact that this isn't just, you know, newcomer producers that are being impacted by this. This is producers at the top of the game. I mean, Liza Marshall, you know, who set up Scot Free in the UK and was Channel 4's commissioner of drama for many years, and now is a producer on a very successful award season. You know, what we anticipate is going to be a very sort of big, strong award season contender, Hamnet from Chloe Zhao, which came out of her company. She had to defer fees on The End We Start From, which is the first film that her production company produced, which is extraordinary. She was saying that she was making that film at the same time as she was making a big Sky TV series called Mary and George, on which the financial model is so different, because in TV you get your fees all up front. You're never asked to defer. You get a percentage of the budget. So it's such a different kettle of fish that it's no wonder that sort of several high-level producers also work in TV now. They have to, because it's the only way they can run their businesses.
I think it's interesting that Ed Guiney, Ian Canning and Liza Marshall all said how difficult it would be to start their companies now, although obviously Liza is starting the film bit, but she's had a long career already. I mean, I think Ed started, you know, he did a bit of line production, a bit of service production. I think they've done TV for quite a long time. I think that's how they've managed to build their company. He talked about having this very fruitful creative relationship with Lenny Abrahamson, you know, the director he met when he was 14, and he found this filmmaker and he got behind him. Now, you know, Fremantle has a substantial stake in their company and allows them, you know, Fremantle takes the risk on films. You know, he talked about how basically Fremantle greenlit Begonia before it went out to the market. So they now have that company behind them to do that. I mean, Ian talked about how the King's Speech, they were able to be entrepreneurial back in the day, and they were able to go out and finance that independently. And obviously that was such a huge hit, and that's allowed them to create Seesaw Films. But he remembered a time when he was working at Renaissance Films where the model was very much that producers would come into the door and they were really rich and they basically had their grandfather's biography they wanted to turn into a film. And that I remember those days, and the industry really has changed a lot since then. And I think quite a lot of that is to do with National Lottery funding and various and the big hits that helped transformed what people thought of as a British film. But, he said he's worried that it's going to go back to that, and Liza, I did think it was noticeable that Liza, when she was talking about the end we start from, Matt, she said, not that it's about money, it's about passion. And I think actually she's in a very privileged position with her background in TV to be able to say that, because as the day went on, for many, 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 most independent producers, very much about money. Of course it's about passion. Otherwise, why would they do it? But also you have to be earning money to be able to build a business. You have to be earning money to be able to pay people to work with you and do the development and help build your company. And that's what we heard of more and more and more as the day went on.
Yeah, I would say, it was interesting to hear Sarah Brocklehurst, who, she is very successful. She's, a younger generation than the sort of Ian Cannings. But she, has made some very successful films already. And she's built a company called Brock Media that's trying to diversify and work across different media, even audio. She's doing, podcasts. But she was saying, if you can't build a sustainable production by production, how are you going to pay the overhead? How are you going to pay to have a staff? Just hearing some of the challenges on the outrun. And I should say, she now has a first look deal with Studio Canal, but a first look deal doesn't pay the bills either. So yeah, it just seems really hard to get those businesses off the ground and become more than a one-woman band and grow a company. And yeah, how do we see the public funders as a role? I mean, I think the BFI can only back something like 12 fiction features a year. And let's be honest, that has to include the new voices as well as the Mike Lees, doesn't it? So they can't, Louise, I think you were saying, they can't be the solution to everything.
Well, I think they hold a very sort of emblematic place in the UK film industry. People really want them to be more of the answer. And I think that they would say that they are trying to be, and they do what they can. Mia Bays, who's director of the BFI Filmmaking Fund, they have a fund of approximately £20 million a year. And that is National Lottery funding. And that is has to very much be public good over private gain. So they are funding, they can't take the risk on projects. And they're not, they're funders rather than financiers, They do try and support as many producers as they can at a later stage. I mean, Mia said they often award late stage development funds to keep the film going so it doesn't fall over before they close finance. I was also talking with Eva Yates and Farhana Bula, who's the new Film 4 director, and Eva, who's director at BBC Film. And they put quite late stage funding in as well. At the BBC, they put, resourcing in quite practical resource into their late development budget, and they fund up to 40% of their production investment before closing. And Eva and Farhana were saying that they work very closely with producers. They're trying to make sure that producers do have enough resource. They're trying to convince the funders and the financiers with whom they're also partnering with on these films to also fund a little bit both earlier and more later. But there's sort of a limit to what they can do. I mean, I think Farhana said, it's very much a live conversation. They're trying to build feasibility into films so that the films get made. And as I say, they are making every effort to do what they can, but they don't. I mean, Film 4 has a budget of 20 million and BBC has a budget of, I think, 11 million pounds. I mean, this is not very much money.
I mean, exactly. They can't be the answer to everything. They are the pillars of the UK film industry in many ways, and yet what they can do is quite limited. And, they would say their role is really to back kind of edgier, bolder, authorial work, particularly kind of newcomers coming through. And on the positive side, I mean, they do back some amazing films, and there are some great films that have come through this year that have been supported by BBC Film, by BFI, by Film 4. I mean, naming a few that were at Cannes. I mean, Harrison Dickinson's Urchin, Pillion, My Father's Shadow, The History of Sound. These are all kind of films that are, that are kind of making big impacts at festivals and hopefully with audiences as well when they do come out. So their role is so integral, but it the industry just needs good, strong producers to be bringing the work through, because that passion, as sort of Liza Marshall pointed out, is what gets great films made. The sort of ability to stick with a project for 7-8 years, and you have to have that kind of passion and commitment to stick with a project for that long, especially when you might not be getting paid with it. I mean, even development funding is extremely kind of difficult to get and hard for producers. So producers need support in this industry. I mean, I was kind of interested that obviously the BFI used to do their BFI Vision Awards, which sadly they lasted in 2020, and I think it's indefinitely on hold. But I was just looking at some of the producers who were given money through that Vision Award over the years, and they're kind of people who are working in the industry today, and possibly that Vision Award is why they're still here. I mean, Sarah Brocklehurst was one, Fiona Lamptey, Oliver Castman at Escape Plan, Helen Simmons was one. So there's a lot of producers who did enjoy that support, and I wonder if that's something maybe the BFI should consider bringing back when you're looking at funding. How you help support producers. That seems to be a key way to help build producers.
I absolutely second that, Matt. I think those Vision Awards really helped those sort of younger producers at the time start to build their companies, because it was, if I'm correct, it was funding you could use not just on one specific film, but you could hire a development person.
Yeah, it was slate financing as well.
Yeah. It was slate financing, and you didn't have to pay it back. That was the other thing. It was just literally a grant.
Which is what the Film Council was back in the day, when it created the film franchises, and it was very much about, that first use of national, or sort of second, iteration of National Lottery funding for film was about building companies, and that's what's gone.
Stir the pot a little by Andy Patterson joined us, a longtime producer who is still making waves, I would say. And he was saying a film like The Girl with the Pearl Earring, he never saw any money come back to him on. I mean, it just crazy. He had a lot of mic drop moments on stage, I think, Andy. He was speaking his mind. But one thing he said, and this is following on Matt, I think you said BBC has, 10 or 11 million?
11 million.
11 million per year for film. And he was saying the BBC should have 100 million.
He said 300 million.
300 million. Thank you, Louise. Would that ever happen? Is that a pipe dream? Just your thoughts, Matt and Louise. Could that help the situation? Of course it would help the situation, but is it feasible?
I mean, anything's feasible, isn't it? It's all a choice. His point was that BBC is such a recognizable global brand, and iPlayer should become a global streamer. Eva mentioned about working with Netflix and how Netflix often buys Pay One on their films, and that helps with the financing of their films. And Andy's point was, why on earth are BBC selling, Pay One away? They should be hanging on to it. And I think Andy even said he applied for the job of director of BBC Film with this amazing business plan. He did say he didn't get very far, but I mean, I think given the disruption and absolute upheaval the streamers have brought to the global film industry, I would say anything's possible. It's a choice for someone to make.
Look, I mean, an £11 million budget, which hasn't actually changed in a long time, so in fact it's probably less even than it was 10 years ago, is unambitious. Let's just put it out there from the BBC side, given that they are a global player, and given that you see other global players like Netflix and Amazon and these much more ambitious US companies putting their money where their mouth is and making films and investing in films and seeing film as an important part of what they give to their audience. So I don't see it ever happening. I don't see ever BBC Film getting a £300 million pound budget from BBC. But certainly, and look, the US the UK broadcasters face their own constant challenges, as we know. I mean, they're constantly buffeted by political headwinds as well in the UK. So it's not even just like that they're competing in the market. They're even competing against their own government sometimes, and that's a difficult challenge in itself. And Channel 4 has had its own challenges in recent years where it might have been privatized, and then they decided not to privatize it. So the fact that Channel 4 is still committed to film, I mean, their investments nearly double what BBC Films is, and they take bigger swings. I mean, that was something that previous directors like David Cossey and Daniel Batzig brought into the mix, was taking bigger swings with bigger investments and backing some higher profile titles. But yeah, look, I mean, again, because they're so emblematic to what the industry is, we'd love to all see them funded a lot more and be able to support the industry a lot more. So, but the reality is that going to happen? Probably not.
And we do know those public funders are fighting the good fight, and they're absolutely pushing for the best they can from within those structures. Let's talk about maybe some good news or some bright spots that came out of the summit, which I thought were really interesting. And a couple of these came out with Charles Gant was talking to Ziggy Kamasa at his new UK-focused distributor, True Brit, and John Friedberg from Black Bear, who runs the UK for them. And, I think they were both saying they would love to see more genre films coming out of the UK, and it sounds like they're both putting their money where their mouth is and going to make that happen. And ever since we saw Get Out coming out of the US, I keep hearing conversations of like, why hasn't there been a British Get Out yet? And I don't know if I have the answer, because, the BFI and these public funders say they want to do more smart genre. But yeah, Matt, you were listening to Ziggy and John, right?
Yeah, it's not even just Get Out. I mean, Wendy, every time there's a horror hit, like Talk to Me, everyone goes, where's the British Talk to Me? Midsummer, where's the British Midsummer? Long Legs, where's the British Long Legs? And, Britain has such a great tradition and history of fantastic horror. I mean, Ziggy pointed out that basically Britain dominated the horror genre landscape in the 60s and 70s before America kind of like took the lead in the late 70s and has kind of basically dominated that landscape ever since. But yeah, horror and genre in general is a great space for British producers to be looking into. And, Farhana from Film Four said she wants more horror on her slate. And Ziggy said he's definitely looking at horror on his slate. And he's got, a few films that he's already put into production. And John from Black Bear, he also brings the international perspective of running the international sales arm of Black Bear, and so knows what's working in the market. And he says one of his key ambitions is to do a very high level British horror film within the next year. So there's a lot of looking willingness, I think, to move into that space, and hopefully producers can respond and writers can respond and bring some good ideas into the market. But it sounds like there's people out there looking to buy stuff. So I would suggest the producers find that great horror script and start pitching it now to Ziggy and John and all the other people who said they want it, Farhana.
Yeah, and also rom-coms, I think. I mean, we didn't mention it specifically on the panel, but something like Rye Lane was such a breath of fresh air for British filmmaking, and I think that film did well, and that should be another model we should be looking at. Louise, you talked to some of those public funders want those kind of films too, don't they?
Well, it's interesting that Farhana said she did. I mean, and all the public funders, gave the advice to producers. I mean, I'm sure producers know this, but look at what's selling at festivals and markets. They said, look at what's being, sold at Toronto. Look what the market wants. And, there was that Midnight Madness horror movie, wasn't there, Obsession, that did a big deal out of Toronto that I think has YouTuber director Cory Barker. And I think that we should see what they develop, because producers say, well, I do send my horror in to get funded by the public funders, and it never gets very fast. One to keep an eye on.
I think we wanted to try to touch on President Trump's latest. He just made a post on social media again saying, 100% tariffs on films made outside the US. Again, no detail. No idea whatsoever of how this would actually work, who's paying the tariff, at what stage, how it's determined, what the rules are. Already California Governor Gavin Newsom's press office said this is like 100% stupid, I think. Mm-hmm. Do we think this thing is actually happening?
I think, by the time this comes out, Trump may have already forgotten he put that tweet, he put that post out there. I just think he just says things to provocate, expects some reaction, gets it, and then kind of moves on. So not everything comes back with, a definitive plan. The thing about 100% tariff is it's gonna harm the U.S. industry as much as it harms the international industry. Given the number of films that are made, that the U.S. studios make outside, taking advantage of countries like the U.K., which have very attractive tax incentives. Now that's obviously what he's kind of railing against a little bit, is he wants some of that production brought back to the U.S. But I think when you look at the 100% tariff approach, that doesn't really solve the problem for even the US who's trying to bring productions back and make it more affordable, because then you would have to really introduce a US federal tax incentive. And that is not something that it would ever get past Congress, because that would require them to vote on it. And I can't see the
That's a lot of money.
And I can't see the Republican Party ever voting to give Hollywood a break. That's just, they're so anti-Hollywood in general. So I think that's a kind of non-starter, that federal tax incentive idea.
There are also other issues with shooting in the US. There are other, it's so expensive and complex to shoot in the US. There are, organizations such as the Teamsters and IATSE to navigate, which, have their roles, and filmmakers have to deal with them. But it's just not that easy to just click your fingers and say, yeah, we'll have a tax credit and bring it all back to the US. What I heard from a well-placed source, that this is a lot of Trump trolling of a particular territory to the north of the US, just to wind them up. I personally think there's absolutely nothing the industry can really do to prepare for anything that Trump might say. I don't think it can be ruled out completely. The latest social media statement from Trump actually came out the night before our summit, which was, again, very well timed, just like the one that came out a week before Cannes earlier this year. But I think that organisations like the BFI, they don't take this thing lightly. They're very much always in touch with the UK government, speaking about the UK. And I'm sure that all the other territories around the world and the National Film Institutes are doing the same thing with their governments.
I hope this doesn't come to fruition, because as we've all said here, if you do want to boost US-based production again, there are smarter ways to do this. There needs to be a very thoughtful plan. Maybe, again, it's state by state. And I do think that's probably a good idea. I think the US industry is hurting, especially in terms of production. So I understand where the impetus comes from.
Well, California is.
Yes.
Yeah.
But this is not the right way. And just to say 100% tariff without any detail, I don't trust John Voight to give us the detail we want anytime soon. So I hope this is just a lot of Trump hot air.
But it probably has the desired reaction, which is to unsettle people. And, it unsettles people. It creates a little bit of uncertainty, just as it did ahead of Cannes about, buying US rights or where a production chooses to film. There's just puts that little element of doubt in, which nobody wants in a risky enough business already.
Yeah, I was going to say, we don't need this level of risk. So let's hope that he stays quiet for a bit on this. Matt and Louise, thank you for joining me. I should say that we've got stories on Screen Daily about Trump's comments latest and about Gavin Newsom's response. And we also had a great report from Stuart Kemp attending the Screen Summit all day with some key takeaways for that. So check that out on Screen Daily. Thanks, Matt and Louise. I will see you next time.
Thank you, Wendy. See you next time.
Thanks, Wendy.
And now I'm going to turn to Charles Gant. Our guest now is going to be very familiar to anyone who has listened to this podcast in past years, especially during awards season. I'm delighted to talk to Charles Gant, who is Screen's awards and box office editor. Welcome, Charles.
Thank you, Wendy.
Charles, 'tis the season, and I don't mean Christmas. I mean awards season. I mean, even before the mince pies are out in Tesco, we've gotten tons of Bafta screening invites for private screenings. These LFF London Film Festival weeks are very busy for that activity. In coming weeks, we're going to talk to you much, much more about specific films in the race this year. But for now, we thought it would be interesting to set out the lay of the land this year. And you're the one person I know who understands the minutiae of all these voting regulations and how they've changed this year and what it really means. So, Charles, what are some of this year's BAFTA rule changes? We don't have to hear every clause, but what are the takeaways and the highlights?
I think there are two really important changes. One, it relates to the Britishness of films. They have increased the amount of available points that you need qualifying you as British, up from 50% to 60%. Does not sound a big deal. But the other thing is that they are saying that either the writer or the director should be British. And there were a few films in the past that were nominated for Outstanding British Film that did not tick those boxes. And the other one is in the documentary chapter. So BAFTA have been tussling with documentary category for a while. I think that most people who work in the field think that certainly the long list of 10, has been quite populist and quite celebrity dominated in recent years. So they're now creating a specialised chapter of documentary filmmakers who will determine the long list. And it is yet to see whether that will bring the category sort of closer in alignment to the Oscar category, which has a very the Oscar shortlist is very cool, very high artistic achievement films. So those are the two big changes.
In my mind, I'm now thinking of this as the gravity rule and the wham rule, Charles. I remember writing an article back when Gravity was nominated for Best British Film. There was a lot of outcry. I think that one's quite obvious. And, you're right that a lot of the wham, no slight on that documentary. It was great entertainment and a lot of fun, but, we would never see something like that on the AMPAS list, even if it had been eligible. But, how do you think this is actually going to potentially shape this year's race, or what kind of impact? Who could win from this? Who could lose? I guess, foreign directors who thought they kind of had a British film might not have a British film anymore, right?
Well, exactly. I mean, there are other examples in addition to Gravity. Also, the two popes, Lobster and Poor Things, were not written, not directed by anyone British. Although, having said that, you can qualify as British by being resident in the UK for the past 6 years. So this year, I was looking at some possible examples, and my mind immediately went to the brilliant film Steve, which is produced by Cillian Murphy, directed by Belgian Tim Meelands, however, written by a British guy, Max Porter, from his own novella. So that will be fine. Steve will be fine.
Okay. A great film, by the way. A nice, smaller film. I recommend people check out on Netflix. I watched it this weekend.
Yeah. I'm a huge fan of Steve. 100 Nights of Hero, which I think would be British produced film, or certainly US-UK production, directed by Julia Jackman, who's Canadian born but resident in the UK. I don't know how long she's lived here for. So that is one's a question mark. And the other big one for me is The Roses. So it's directed by an American, Jay Roach. It's written by Tony McNamara, who's Australian. He's been living in the UK for a while, I think since The Favourite. I don't know if that's 6 years. It's lead produced by Sonny March, Adam Ackland and Leah Clark. They would certainly want that film to qualify as British, and there is an appeals process. Benedict is an executive producer on the film. Looking at documentary, I think it will be very intriguing to see how, particularly the long list shapes out. In the recent years, the BAFTA nominees for documentary have actually been pretty respectable, but there has been a jury intervention. So what's happened is the voters, the opt-in voters, which are, by the way, very numerous, produced this long list of 10, which last year included films like Elton John, Never Too Late, I Am Celine Dion, Made in England, the films of Powell and Pressburger, and Superman, the Christopher Reeve story, which were all kind of about famous people. None of those films ended up on the Oscar shortlist of 15. So the question will be, but then the jury last year, had a bit of an intervention, and they kick out 5 of the films, and you end up with a set of nominees that actually looked, I think, pretty decent, although it was quite different from the set of Oscar nominations. So I think the question will be what happens this year with this specialist chapter, and it really depends who gets to be in it. Because if it's feature filmmakers, I think you'll end up with a really exciting list. And with respect to everyone who's listening, who works in the non-fiction television space, their taste is perhaps different. I mean, clearly, what we've had in the past has also represented the taste of quite sort of rank and file BAFTA members. And we will be excluding people, art house directors and producers, who have great taste, who have loved to opt in, but they don't work in documentaries. So that those people will be excluded. So it'll be, I think, fascinating to see what the outcome is of all this.
Yeah, I always like to look at the BAFTA nominees versus something like the Cinema Eye honors, which happens that AJ Schnack and some other filmmakers founded to really look at who is really pushing nonfiction cinema forward and doing really interesting and important things. And yeah, I can't wait to see how this impacts. And yeah, it's always the most divergent, I think, set of nominees between BAFTA and AMPAS, because AMPAS hates those sort of bio docs in general, unless it's something really, really special.
Exactly.
So yeah, fascinating. Yeah.
And last year, AMPAS nominated Porcelain War, Soundtrack to a Coup d'etat, and Sugarcane, which didn't even make the BAFTA long list. So, those are amazing films. So it'll be, will this change sort of bring, increase the chances of these highly achieved artistic documentaries?
I hope so. I'm excited as a documentary lover. Yes. And I should say, AMPAS doesn't always get it perfect. I still hold a grudge for that year that my octopus teacher, won the Oscar. I'm trying to go through therapy to let it go, but we'll see. So, Charles, let's move on to AMPAS. And what has changed at AMPAS? Have there been other significant changes there?
Well, for me, there have been lots of changes. There have been lots of changes to the rules. Including a rule that is going to somehow or other make sure that people watch the nominated films before they vote, and they won't be eligible to vote unless they do. I'm actually not clear how that's going to work.
How do they police that?
How do they police that, exactly. In cinematography, that is now a category that is going to have a shortlist stage of 15, which I think will be good, because I think it allows voters who are perhaps not so engaged to see, bear in mind this is voted for by the cinematography chapter. It allows them to see what in the first round, it will probably be the people who have really watched the films that are going to vote, and they're going to state their claim, and they're going to say, everyone else, pay attention, these are the 15 films that are the true achievements in cinematography. And I think that will make it easier for everyone else in the next round to kind of understand, oh yeah, right, I must see that film. I haven't seen that film. It's on the short list of 15. So I think that's going to be great for cinematography. But the other, I think more important than that, is the introduction of the new category, casting, which AMPAS has been dragging its heels over this for years. The casting directors have been campaigning long and hard. BAFTA joined the party about 5 or 6 years ago with a category for for casting at the Film Awards. It's been there in the Emmys for a long time. So this is exciting, and I think particularly for the people who might be nominated this year. And I've got to put on that list, Wendy, I'm sure you'll agree with me, one battle after another. I'm going to massacre the pronunciation of his name, Cassandra Koulakundis, I think, who is Paul Thomas Anderson's regular casting director. So I think Cassandra has got to be, in contention. Hamnet, amazing casting by the UK's own Nina Gold. And then,
and I'll just add on Hamnet that I think people love to see sort of actors stretching themselves as Jesse and Paul do.
Yeah.
But also they love to see a discovery of kid actors, of discovering those child actors. That is hard casting. And I think particularly, Hamnet will sway people if they weren't swayed by the story cast.
It's almost a spoiler to say it, but so Jacoby Dupe plays Hamnet. But then there's a casting of a role of the actor who plays Hamlet. And for people who don't know who it is, I'm not going to say, because that for me, when he walked onto the stage, was such
it's kind of a gasp moment.
It was a gasp moment. That is a genius casting choice that they made for that role. And then I'm going to add Sentimental Value, Joachim Trier's film. Wendy, I know you love the Scandi filmmakers, and I know you love Joachim Trier.
I do, and this is probably my favorite film he's made.
And the casting is by an American Avi Kaufman and by, I'm assuming, Norwegian Ingvild Kolset Haga. It'll be. There's going to be a shortlist stage, so the casting directors will come up with a shortlist of 15. We're going to fall off our chairs, Wendy, if those 3 films are not on that shortlist, and we'll see what goes all the way to the nominations and the win for casting at the Oscars.
Yeah, I think those are 3 very solid predictions, and maybe we'll do a sort of video of us actually falling off our chairs if something doesn't go to plan. But thank you, Charles. I know we're going to be seeing you very soon. I'm sure I'll see you at some Bafta screenings, some LFF events in the coming week or 2. But thanks for joining us.
It's my pleasure, Wendy.
Thanks, everybody listening, for tuning into this episode of The Screen Podcast. Do subscribe and rate us. Well, I hope rate us highly wherever you get your podcast. That really helps the whole podcast and its audience. Thanks to the whole Screen team, especially our podcast editor, Ellie Calnan, and web editor, Orlando Parfit. Join us again soon. The next episode will drop on October 23rd. Thanks for listening.